There was a photo posted yesterday for the gym. There were 2 pictures about it being like cardio day or something.
You're looking thick, wasn't he?
There was somebody in the background of the first photo. I had to zoom in because I couldn't tell who it was. It was you. You had long hair and you looked real thick.
Thanks to Jay
That's
Chat.
Photoshop.
Thanks to Jay Chat.
Photoshop.
I told
That's just because his arms on both sides look like they're stretching out his torso.
I said thanks to Jay Chapman for making me look like a University of New Hampshire third string lineman. Linebacker.
Good morning, Misfits. You are tuning into another episode of the Misfit Podcast. Full Goon Squad in the house.
Yo.
Honorary Goon Squad member, Misfit Athletics coach, OG, CrossFit Games athlete, Caroline Connors. Welcome back.
Thanks.
Hi, Daryl.
For part 2. We are in week 3 of Comp Block 2. I mean, it's business as usual. You head to discord.gg/Misfit Athletics. We're talking about rowing and biking and skiing and weightlifting and people asking questions about how to set up their monitor. I didn't think about, so yesterday Paige put the thing in about the undefined rest. I never thought about that from a multi-machine standpoint, where if you have multiple machines set up, or even in a Metcon, you do that so you can go back and see your splits.
We did that
yeah,
with...
I didn't even keep track of my meters. I just held my paces on the machines.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like if you have your metric, it doesn't matter as much. But I just thought it was interesting that a lot of people don't know that there's undefined rest depending on which model concept.
I think they actually, we thought that for a while. We were like, if you've got a PM3, it doesn't do that. But
I think they all do,
ours
but you can't. There are certain metrics that you can't do intervals. Like,
yeah, it's the multiple ones
like
where you
calories
change
or
it.
something.
Not every gym is a Kyle either, who is willing enough to sit there with his computer and a printer cable to make sure that all of them have the upgraded software in the computer.
Kyle's like that, the character in Fast and the Furious who like plugs his computer into all like Vin Diesel's cars and just soups them up.
Is he wearing like bike gloves?
Yeah,
And like a mad scientist
that's
jacket?
that's what Kyle does with his computer and all the C2 machines. He's got like a 48-foot Ethernet cable, just like syncing those bad betties up.
But like, to me, undefined rest is if I'm doing something at home and I don't know, like if I'm doing like a sprint piece and I don't know how long I'm going to rest, like I tell myself it's, 3 to 5 minutes. Then you go back over and you start skiing and it's fine. Then there's the multi-machine version, which I think would be important, especially with the amount of times that like you go in and see that I've asked you to do forever, sustain, reach, rotated through multiple ones. And then the furthest level would be you're doing a couplet, triplet, whatever that has repeating, 25 calorie versions or this many meters. If you set that undefined rest, every time you get back to the machine, it starts over. So that could help you with rollover. That can give you your splits throughout each one. So, we ask athletes to really get into their metrics.
I got one more thing too. Sophie specifically has been doing a lot of maffetone work, and she's trying to make sure that when she does her send work, that it doesn't take her, the normal time of like 5 to 10 minutes to recover. She's been using her maffetone work and then doing undefined rest to see how her resting window has shortened as she's increased her aerobic fitness, saying that like, if you're an athlete that's high power and you're like, man, I don't know if I'm getting better at my aerobic work because sometimes maybe my maffetone's only going down by 1/10 of a second every 2 weeks or something like that.
Yeah.
That's another concrete like evidence factor right there. Like, hey, notice that it used to take me 6 or 7 minutes to recover in these send pieces. And now my undefined rest says 3.5 or 4. That's just another metric for you to realize like what you're capable of if the event calls for you to sprint and then wait to the next heat till you sprint again, kind of like they did at Wadapalooza.
Yeah, they're as someone who would like, I would define myself as, we did the rabbits and turtles episode, like the more of the power athlete. That is a really important thing because that's where you're going to actually notice the difference. Like I can go run, 90 minutes and hold similar paces over the course of 2 or 3 weeks. But then when I am doing bitch work in class or doing a Metcon, that's where I really notice that stuff. And like we had the row piece not too long ago where you walked over and you saw my phone and you were like, oh, you're actually getting back down into, your 110s and 120s. When I used to be in class before I got back into doing this, I would stay at 150, 160, 170 during my rest periods.
Nice.
And it's
Extra
not
training.
that easy to like get back on the machine and start going again. Cause I immediately get up into the 180s and then you're like at anaerobic threshold. You're not like a totally different ball game. So, being able to see where that stuff shows up is super important. And that's how I personally do my send stuff. I'll try to get my heart rate back down near like 100 or something like that. And now that takes significantly less time than it used to.
And that's a huge thing for a competitor. Like there's so many times where they make you reset with like a 1 minute rest and you want to be able to get back to what feels like normal again so you can give it hell. And if you can't get yourself there, Maffetone work is the way to get there. And now you can use your undefined rest as a way of marking your progress over time as you train throughout the season.
So how was sort of an off week? And then I'd ask you how this week is going, but you're like
2 days in.
two pieces in.
Yeah.
Right.
Last week was good. I mean, I think it was almost a better scenario kind of going from like a deload into what it's going to feel like.
Yeah.
Because then I think I would have gotten to the point where I'm just starting to get kind of antsy and wanted to do more.
Right.
So it was good going into that week and then going back down a little bit and just kind of, getting some stuff done that I needed to.
Right.
And then this week's been good. Today's Metcon reset and interval was really shitty. Like jumping into a 150-pound sandbag today wasn't bad, but
Seems kind of heavy.
it was only 30 feet at a time
Only?
for like 12
That sounds
rounds.
pretty hard.
That's the push press workout.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was hard after the GHD deadlift.
That one looked fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rogue
Troll sets.
double unders.
Yeah.
Troll sets.
I wrote a lot of pieces that have troll sets.
Well, I told him to be nicer to people, and he just
So I was.
realized that he can be. It might even be more evil
Got it. 7:30
because you've done the
walls.
same amount of work in less time, and now you have to keep going.
Yeah. So you're in week 1 of your peaking phase now. So you're a week 4 athlete. So this is like lowest volume week.
Cool.
I definitely really liked it for Austin being the type of athlete who's trying to balance and figure out his work schedule with this. He almost had like a trial week of this is what's going to be expected of you. Like for him, unless it rains on any given day, Saturday and Sunday are the only days where his volume is going to go up the entire time.
Yeah.
So for him to be able to go through that and realize like this is doable or this isn't, or we can move this piece around. So that's actually really good feedback that we could potentially use in next year's version, instead of the idea of go right into deload, having a week where you're like, this is the lower volume. This is what we're going to be expecting of you. Figure out your schedule, maybe make that shift into the Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, that sort of thing. It's almost like practicing to get
Feel it out
yourself
week.
into that. Exactly.
Yeah.
Trying to feel out like lifestyle and all that good stuff. Speaking of lifestyle, last week was part 1 of revisiting the Misfit project. We spent quite a bit of time. I do recommend that if you're about to listen to this podcast, that you take the time to go back and listen to part 1. Not just because it's a 2-part thing, but because the stuff that we talk about in part 2 is very much up a CrossFitter's alley. Whereas last week might be the kind of thing where you can find a piece or two to really, move the needle on what you're doing, especially outside of the gym. So last week we covered the tribes portion, which is talking about how your personal relationships and your relationship to the outdoors are what I personally believe, and I think you guys agree with me to a certain extent, are the number one like baseline factor for personal health. We talked about sleep. We talked about things that we are currently doing as individuals. And then we talked about mindset, talked about some meditation stuff, talked about, what you guys do. You have the surfing, and Caroline, does sort of your morning routine with the walks in the woods with your dogs and all that. So we are going to move on this week to the next topic. And If you think it sounds like I am reading something, that's because I am. I took the time in the last episode to go through and as part of revisiting the Misfit project, read through the explanations that we originally had when the idea started. So we are now making the segue from the mind and the stress and all that good stuff to fuel. The concept of our foundation of good sleep and stress management that has been built while surrounded with support is all about setting ourselves up to succeed in anything we try to stack on top of it. The first pillar we place on this foundation is the fuel we choose to put into our body. With 3 massive steps towards optimizing our hormone production, we are beginning to set the stage for changes that can last longer than a week, month, year, etc. As we search for solutions that will eventually create what works for us for a lifetime, our bodies and minds have been primed to be more receptive to these changes. In search for what truly works for us individually, the first step is always paying attention to the quality of anything that we are purposefully ingesting. That step alone can pay huge dividends in our health. As the bigger picture starts to take shape, the concept of setting yourself up to succeed grows exponentially. The combination of support, recovery, mindfulness, and an assortment of nutrients that your body begs for, you will be able to begin making the right choices easier and on your own. I would say this is the topic where, again, we can start to each individually talk about the way that we eat when we're being mindful of the way that we eat. Obviously, people have moments where, you're sort of choosing what you're eating, and then, the food sort of takes over sometimes. And
The food took over.
How many sandwiches have you had today?
0, actually. But I'm about to have one right after this podcast. Nice roast beef and cheese.
And again, I think, we have, I don't know, all jokes aside, are you actively trying to gain weight, or is that like a thing of the past?
No, I'm not actively trying to. I found that I mentioned this last time. I think it had to do more with sleep, but I found that doing the 16-hour kind of fasting thing had a really negative kind of compounding effect, because what it did, it basically either, I don't know if it's kind of a chicken or the egg thing. It's like, do I eat, if I come home too late and I eat too much because I didn't eat enough in the front half of the day, that fucks up my sleep, but it also means that when I wake up, I'm not hungry. And it's like, and I still am not super hungry when I actually right when I wake up. I have to wait like an hour or two before I eat, but, I wasn't intentionally trying to gain weight, but that has been a side effect of probably just eating the amount of food that I should be eating. I think if I had actually tracked it before, when I was really only eating lunch and like a big dinner, if I had to guess, I was eating far fewer calories than I needed for the amount of like exercise and just like cerebral stimulation that I need to do my job as well as I want to. So having like now reintroducing eating like a full normal breakfast, that's still, and now it is also mean like, because I eat breakfast, eating dinner is it's a little bit smaller, means my sleep's better. It also means that I finish eating a little bit earlier, and I still almost always get like 12 hours of fasting, which is just from when I finish eating dinner to go to bed, and then when I wake up and eat the next morning. So the gaining weight thing has been just a good side effect, because it's not like my cardio or my gymnastics have gone to shit or anything like that, things that CrossFitters might be concerned about. So yeah, I think having,
and that is a classic sign of being underfed, the idea that you can gain weight, and because you are properly fueling and energizing yourself, the things that you would assume would take a hit don't.
Yeah. So that's been like an overall just net positive, mostly just from an energy throughout the day, being irritable. Turns out like even, I've listened to a podcast where it's like, if you find you're irritable, like go eat something. Just go eat something like high protein, high
Snickers.
Fat. Eat a.
You can always be eating.
Yeah.
Jeez, we're gonna have to
You
eat
always
snacks
gonna be
around the
eating?
office
Yeah, I'm always
now.
Get you a feed
They're all
tube.
Hunter.
But yeah, just generally being being fed has been been helpful.
You've had issues with this as
I'll
well.
keep a Snickers on my
Correct.
desk.
I know you got
I mean,
Snickers.
I would venture a guess that I've tried just about every CrossFit related diet that exists. Going back to like before I moved home from grad school, and we were doing the carb backloading, which meant go to Wendy's at the end of your day and eat like a triple classic and a large fry and like 2 Frosties because like
love the carb
you didn't eat
backloading
much
days.
all day and you just trained really
The
hard.
increase
to
in
earn
body temperature was remarkable.
Oh my God, I went to bed at
be a melting candle by the
412
end.
degrees. It was a convection oven.
Literally, you see the
Can you imagine
steam
my
rising off me.
CMP bill now with my Uller trying to keep me cool?
Can't afford it. So, having gone through that, the CrossFit Zone diet, paleo, fasting, like Hunter just described a minute ago, kind of ebbed and flowed with what like my objective was with my fitness for a while. It was trying to be competitive. And then it was like, you're not competitive, just do it for health. So then I started doing the fasting thing. One of the things that I think we all liked about fasting was that you didn't preoccupy your mind with the first half of your day. Like, I gotta eat. Like I didn't have, an omelet or whatever the hell else I was going to eat for breakfast. I was just able to like focus on what I want to get done first thing in the morning, which is when I find to be the most productive. So it worked really well with my lifestyle. But then as I started to try to work out a little bit more intensely, noticed that like I was doing the exact same thing you were. Like I'd backfill my entire day with, 2,000, 3,000 calories at the end of the day and then wonder why like I'm not sleeping all that great. And I don't feel like I need to eat first thing in the morning. And it's like a snowball that keeps rolling down a hill. And next thing I know, I'm just eating things that I probably wouldn't normally choose to eat just because I need to get calories in at the end of the day. And unfortunately, what's the most calorie dense food in the world? Things that are processed that don't really help you, potentially heal and recover from the training that you just did.
Jar of
Yeah,
peanut butter with Oreos crushed in it.
Yeah, don't judge. Something
Ah.
wrong with a half jar of peanut butter with a
Have
sleeve of Oreos in it.
I know you've taken some steps, but have you made any progress in your digestion?
I have currently a few supplements that I'm on. I'm still awaiting the results of my diagnostic tests. But yeah, one of the things that people keep saying is the sandwich thing. And I've realized that my digestion, which I think is different from
Can you
everybody
provide
else's.
the listeners with any context
follow
other
my
than
Instagram?
one of
I
the
don't know
things
there
that
are
people
that
say
many
about me
people.
is sandwich?
Well,
Sure,
I'm just posting
Man,
it.
hurts.
Sure, been hammering bologna and cheese sandwiches.
I got
left
Chris
and-
coming in the office yesterday. He goes, "Is that one of your microwave bologna and cheeses?" I'm like, "I don't microwave a bologna and cheese sandwich. That's not what I'm eating. I've just been eating sandwiches. I get sourdough bread. I get some.
Why are you so sensitive about your sandwiches?
I'm not eating bologna and cheese, although that is a good sandwich. And some cheese curls. Then you're trying to eat a little bit more regularly in the front half of the day. Kind of the same idea here is I've been mixing in a first meal typically closer to the 12 or 13 hour mark as opposed to what I was doing before, which was closer to like 16 or 18 hours. Because again, I was messing with my sleep and not thinking about like, all right, what does this actually do to me if I do this more than like just one time? Like we all get busy and then, oh shit, I got to eat stuffed calories at the end of the day. That's like a one-off, but that becomes your every single day you don't digest food, which is something I have a problem with. So I'm trying to spread out more of the nutrition throughout the day. So I eat smaller meals more frequently so that my body doesn't get overwhelmed and then not digest my food, because I think there's a lot of eating that I do that doesn't necessarily lead to like recovery or fueling. It's literally just put food in my body doesn't digest it. And then it's like a self-perpetuating cycle, if you can get my mean without me getting gross. So the idea here is trying to spread that out through the entire day. So I fuel myself with the relatively same amount of calories, but I allow my body to digest it more effectively.
You're such an interesting eater to me because I've seen you eat a burrito in like
3.8 seconds.
30 seconds, maybe like a double burrito.
Speed, not volume.
And I'll look over and it takes you like 25 fucking minutes to eat a sandwich.
It's hard to eat a sandwich. I cut the roof of my mouth a couple weeks ago when I was eating my sandwich.
Are you
On
intentionally
what?
slowing down?
Yes. Yeah, that's another thing I've been given is trying to slow down when I eat is not rush. It's not a race, but I don't know. Everyone always asks me if I was in like prison before because of how fast I eat. Like I'm trying to get through the mess hall as fast as possible before I get shanked.
So we've
like,
addressed
it's not the
this
case.
before. You were a ravenous young gentleman and you were eating all of the food in your family's house, so they started hiding it from you, correct?
Yeah, so to clarify this, basically, yes. I got $3 a day from my mother Joyce to go to the Wyndham Middle School, high school, all that, and get meal. At my high school and middle school, that was good for like a PB&J and like a milk for an entire day. And that's like, I get to school at like 6 a.m. and leave after sports at, 5 or 6 p.m. That's the entire fuel I had for the day. So if I got home and I had that's all I ate, I'd find the cosmic brownies, the Christmas tree cakes, the oatmeal cream pies.
He wanted to say Christmas tree cakes,
Yeah, that's
but
what I
he
said.
figured he would He would knock out 8 syllables for efficiency's sake.
So quickly realized that I wasn't getting enough calories in my body. And I think it's the habit that developed as I was growing up to the point. Yeah, exactly. I speak and eat burritos at the same speed. And I just found that habit carried over past when I actually could have all the food that I wanted. Like if I went to Bates and I went to the chow hall, I could eat whatever I wanted, but I'd still eat the same speed I would have as if I was trying to like devour, those cosmic brownies before my mom got home.
If Sherb is eating with his noise canceling headphones on, it sounds like he's trying to break his teeth. You can hear his teeth clashing with each other, with one another.
I'm decimating that food. It's not surviving my chew.
And then he doesn't digest it.
Yeah.
There are some actual reasons why that happens. So if you're having digestion issues and
would you get
eat
a food
really
like a food
fast,
sensitivity
slow
test?
down.
Is that what you did?
That's part of the profile, as well as like a GI mapping thing. Let your imagination go with what that means. But
I'm just imagining a Google map.
He had to poop in his hands.
it's actually a French fry tray.
I think I've talked about this before, but I did the U-Biome thing way back when they launched. And I was so scared of like how I was going to poop in a bag. I was like, how do I have the accuracy for this? I've never watched like
gloves.
And then they send a Q-tip and they're like, dab your toilet paper with the Q-tip and put it in this thing. And I was like, this makes way more sense than trying to poop in a bag. Like I didn't know if they were going to give me something that like strapped over the toilet seat.
They give you like a mason. They give you a mason jar.
Turd hammock.
I don't know what I thought was going to happen,
You walk
but
around
then
with
when
one of those bags attached to you, like the dogs who are incontinent, so you can just walk around and be like, "It's time."
Wait, you don't
And
have one of
just
those?
not move. No, I do. It's
Okay,
on.
just checking.
moving on.
Just use this.
How? I'm trying to think of how to ask this question, but basically, Sherb addressed like sometimes he's got to get calories in, and if it's not planned and it's last minute, like what are you supposed to do? So how do you eat as much as you need to, and the things that you need to, thinking about like concepts like nutrient density and all of that, with the idea that you are super busy and you do need to take in a lot more calories than an everyday gym goer. Like, how do you balance that?
So I mean, just like Sherb, I think I've done just about every. I think I've kind of followed in like your footsteps a little, not in all the things, but like, if
you're
does
enunciating
like,
too well for that
You
to
need
be
to
the
speak a
whole
lot
story.
faster. Eat burritos a lot faster.
This works, whatever. I feel great. I'm like, okay, I'll try it. So I've kind of gone through everything, and once I started working with Mike, it took some time, but I kind of realized like the importance of fueling for performance and getting enough calories in. Right. And for a while, that concept was really difficult for me to understand because I was still kind of like, that's a lot of food. Like, I don't want to gain weight. I don't want to, whatever.
Right.
And I probably up until the last couple of years was when I really started to like accept the, fueling for performance, you know, and, all that stuff. So, I try to always have, like, I eat something similar for breakfast every day, whether it's oatmeal or a peanut butter banana breakfast burrito wrap.
Hold on a second.
Yeah.
You haven't seen this on the gram?
Yeah,
What's
Doug?
in that bitch?
So it's a Mission brand gluten-free wrap. That's a really important
I'm
part.
fucking tracking on those.
So good.
Don't you hate it though when they come and they got a little bit too much moisture and they're all stuck together and you're like slowly peeling them apart so you don't ruin the whole thing?
You just don't go
happens.
double layer then?
Careful.
There was like a 2 or 3 month stretch where all of the ones that they shipped to Maine, whether it was Shaw's, this Hannaford, that Hannaford, they're all stuck together.
Yeah.
Weird. I did get one recently, like
Seems
maybe a
upset.
month or two ago, where they were all like thin and falling apart. That was a bad batch, but now they're back.
Yep.
They're good.
They've been good recently. I
All right,
guess.
so gluten-free Mission tortilla. Check.
I spread peanut butter on it.
Yep.
And I put a banana in it.
Yep.
And I lined the banana with blueberries and raspberries. And
Okay.
I wrap it up and I put it in the air fryer. So like, have you ever had one of those like turnovers that are
Like a
stuffed
Pillsbury
with, like,
toaster strudel?
No, a turnover. Like you put it in the oven and it's stuffed with like raspberries or something.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It tastes like that. Like the berries get warm. You got to make sure that you let it cool down before you bite into it, or you end up. It's so good.
Warm berries.
I gotta go.
Yeah, and it like kind of
That
caramelizes
sounds so
the banana.
fucking good.
It's really good.
How much chocolate's in it?
What if it were
None.
like a pancake instead of a tortilla?
Like you wrap it in a pancake?
Yeah.
I think an air fried pancake wouldn't go so well.
What an Eggo waffle.
That'd be a weird. I think that would be an odd consistency.
What's our
Fuck, that sounds so good.
That does
It
sound
is,
really good.
Yeah.
So your breakfast is one of those two things? Is it
Yeah,
like an
usually.
alternating?
Yeah. Yeah. And then like throughout the day, I'll like easy carbs that I can just eat during training. Like a protein bar, protein shake. Sometimes, well, yeah, proper fuel, obviously. Just things that I have like rice cakes.
Use
all that
code
stuff.
Carol to save 10% on your order. We'll make sure that's a thing by the time this
I was
airs.
gonna say, really? Nice. Yeah, all the proper fuel with code Carol. And then when I'm done training, my dinner is usually a lot bigger with vegetables and all that stuff. So I try to make sure that every night I have, that's like the most nutrient dense meal at the end of the day. So yeah,
do you have a meal? I might have missed a part. Do you have a meal during the day that is more like solid food, or is that just like breakfast and dinner?
Yeah, usually it's just breakfast and dinner.
Yep.
And then my protein shake, proper fuel, code Carol. I'll have like, I'll blend it with like frozen strawberries and stuff. So it's a little bit thicker. But yeah, if I have
Like Hunter
2
beer
full
mile
training, yeah.
Sorry,
Listen,
inside
with 3
joke.
Ts.
Third string linebacker, University, New Hampshire.
University
see
of
you go-
Southern New Hampshire.
I want to see you go
I
against
actually
third
did
string.
say Southern New Hampshire. I said University.
I want to see an Okie drill, third string
DeVry
versus Hunter.
ITT Tech.
I went to MIT T-Tech. I went to ITT Tech.
I think most of that is because of my schedule though, because I usually am training and then whether I'll have 2 sessions, but the break in between isn't really enough to have a full meal and digest it.
Yep.
And then I have to coach and then I'm usually done. So then I go home and eat dinner. But I was like on days that I am doing 2, which will probably happen in the next couple of weeks or so. Like on the weekends, it'll be 2 full sessions where I probably go home and like eat lunch
Yep.
in the middle.
Right.
Which would be rice and whatever.
Yep. The way that I eat, I want to present like way too many qualifiers. The reason I want to do that is so people can understand that when we're talking about this, so much of it is personalized and is about what you're trying to accomplish, is about your goals, your personal health history, genetics, all that different stuff. So I mentioned in the last podcast about this stuff that I am genetically predisposed for novelty seeking, and that in terms of the whole like dopamine relationship with your brain applies a lot to food. As a lot of people know, like we sort of joked earlier about, or I joked earlier about the idea of the way you eat when you're controlling the situation, and then the way that you eat when the food kind of takes over. So with that in mind, and I know Kenzie has told me I need to reevaluate my relationship with food. If there are things that I shouldn't be eating around that are easily accessible, I'm going to eat them. I am just going to.
Maya, please.
It's the way it is, and I have to tell
Oreos. God fucking damn.
I have to tell my wife not to buy that stuff because she gets joy out of like going to like there's a local like sort of hippie grocery store called Royal River Foods, and they have a lot of like I have celiac, so they have a lot of like fancier like gluten-free like dessert type things. And she presenting me with that like on the couch on a Saturday night is like her favorite thing, whereas I'm like, you gotta stop. You have to stop doing this, that sort of thing. So there's that. I am also predisposed to issues with blood sugar, and sort of a potential relationship there with certain types of cancer, like further down the road. So I do fasting in the morning, which helps a lot with the whole dopamine sort of thing. It's a bit of a like control type deal. And then I do well with a higher fat diet, and that actually is part of my genetic profile, and it's not a part of a lot of people's genetic profile. So I do like super high protein, high fat for lunch. And then as I said in the last podcast, I try to train 7 days a week. It's better for me mentally. So high carb, high protein at night. And I do prioritize nutrient density. Everyone will laugh. I don't not eat vegetables. That is not an accurate
He finds a way.
statement. I find a way through
Drink my vegetables.
through greens and a blender to have enough vegetables. But there's also like, I have to make sure that my rice is cooked in bone broth and it's got a bunch of like cilantro and stuff like that in it. Like I do have to find the places for that. And it's more important for me because I don't have that part of my plate that has the big like hunk of vegetables on it. Cause I'm a child. So I think, again, based on previous episodes, this is probably the topic that will have the most changes applied to it compared to how we talked about it before. And I want to sort of go back around the horn just to address the concept of, like, you guys are all affiliate coaches. You all give nutrition advice on a fairly regular basis. Like, what does that spectrum look like between how you would address nutrition with a client, member, whatever, to how you personally eat, and sort of that world in between? I know that based on the Discord that people want specific instructions. I'm going to throw out a blanket statement and you can massage the statement a little bit if you'd like. So
Don't get too handsy.
1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. And a lot of times that is related to your goal body weight, especially shorter term, trying to gain weight, trying to gain 5-10 pounds, 5-10 extra grams, somewhere in that range. Some athletes, that's actually more. And then a lot of people who are trying to lose weight, you know, you're trying to lose 5-10 pounds. You should be eating in that deficit of who that person is, how they would be eating once you get there. The next one is, so that's almost universal, the 1 gram per pound of body weight. It's the one thing that a lot of different communities actually agree on. The next portion is enough carbohydrates to support physical and mental like performance. Now, that's the one where that variable there's a big difference in different athletes there. There are CrossFit athletes who do well down near 250, 300 grams of carbohydrates a day. And there are athletes that eat 600, 700, 800 grams of carbohydrates a day. And then as much as people hate it, energy expenditure and the energy that you put into your body, the calories do matter. So we're essentially backfilling with fat to bring us to that total calorie number that decides whether you're in a calorie surplus, deficit, trying to sort of stay in line with what you're doing, all that jazz.
Yeah, so I think it's pretty easy to see the difference between, you know, anybody that's come to us with goals of, you know, or just questions of, hey, how should I be eating, are usually people who literally have no idea how they should be eating.
Right.
And the number one thing that typically we see is that they're having, like, I don't know, maybe 10 grams of protein throughout the day. So that's the biggest issue.
That does happen a lot, yeah.
But usually I'll just have somebody who, you know, is asking for advice, just write down a couple of days of what they eat. And some people give us like 2 sheets of paper, but the majority of the people give us like a half a sheet of paper. I'm like, where's the rest of what you're eating?
Not telling you.
Yeah. So it's, for the most part, I think a lot of people are under eating. And I think that's just the culture that has been kind of pushed in everybody's faces.
Yeah.
And, you know, so just looking at whoever is asking for advice, seeing what they currently eat. And honestly, the first thing that I do is show them or kind of give them the information about like the Whole30.
Yeah.
Which I don't think it's not sustainable, but it's a good kind of starting point for a lot of people to understand the difference between processed and not processed foods. And a lot of people just want the easy way out or have just lived that way their entire lives.
Baseline has to be actual food.
A difference. So I've found a lot of success with beginners and stuff who come in, they do a month of Whole30 and they see changes and like that's all they need to be like, okay, real food is like actually what I need to be eating.
Right.
And then from there, I kind of just will guide them in a way to how to incorporate that into like a sustainable lifestyle. Like, okay, this is what you're eating. This is what you need to kind of look out for. And a lot of people have had huge success with that. And, you know, for the most part, unless there's some underlying issues, like it doesn't get to a point where they're like overeating all of those foods. And it,
Right.
you know, kind of comes back full circle where it's like, okay, now we need to take a look at how much you're eating. But it can kind of go in either direction.
Yeah, for me, the protein portion of it is so important because if we can maintain that, if someone goes through the Whole30 and realizes how their body feels once they detox a little and then give it actual nutrients, after that typically is when you're going to start to add things like the rice back in. You're going to add things, you know, like the tortilla, whatever.
Starches.
You add that stuff back in, and we just as sort of nutrition mentors have to make sure that they understand that that protein piece there needs to stay at that level that's going to sustain muscle repair, because as they add the carbs back in, if they're replacing the protein with those carbs, it's going to be an issue. They're probably going to overeat that. They're not going to recover as well, that sort of thing. So, as they're making, or you listening are making your way through that journey, for me, if my eating sort of doesn't feel right, I go back to measuring my protein, and I usually do pretty well. Like if I get that down, then I don't have the same amount of food cravings that I normally would. And like, I'm always sort of guessing and playing around with like if I feel like I'm working out more, I'm probably going to like push that carb number at night a little bit higher and then the fat number a little bit lower at lunch. I'm always sort of sliding those things around, but I have to maintain that protein level or things just start to feel off.
Yeah, I don't know if you had more to add to.
Oh,
to
no,
that.
I was just going to say that I think a big problem that most people have is that they, you know, if they are watching what they eat or whatever, it's like, oh yeah, well, I count my calories. And I think that is just a huge issue with the majority of people that are just looking at calories because of that
Right.
concept where they could be getting all of their calories from like a 50-50 fat and carb. And then they just can't recover and they're gaining weight and they don't understand why. And counting calories works for some people, but I think there has to be some level of experience of already tracking and like being aware of how much, you know, protein you could be eating, how much carbs you could be eating. Like I'm sure any of you guys could go a whole day without counting or whatever, weighing your food and still have a pretty good idea as to like what that ratio is. And that's just a concept that's just completely like in a whole nother universe for most people.
Like our Western diet is based upon like higher carbohydrate, lower protein, lower fat, because it's just seen as healthy. And the problem with that diet, it's the same thing we would give to our like cattle to fatten them up so that we can sell them for a higher profit. Is in our Western diet, the only way to maintain your weight is to chronically starve yourself because you are not getting the necessary nutrients and the protein like we're talking about. So you're always playing this game of like, can I stay just a little bit under fueled so I don't see my body weight increase? And you know, I think tracking is a great way, but tracking with a better advice is where I would go as well. I almost never send someone down the calorie route unless it's just for like their own interest. Like I'd like to know how many calories are you. Oh, great. Track for a day. But more often than not, it always goes back to like, what are you eating? One of the things that I always like that you used to say is, you know, imagine your body like a car, you know, and think about what kind of car you are. Are you a hybrid that drives 2 miles a day? Or are you, an F1 vehicle that's doing whatever 1,000 laps at 1,000 miles an hour? And think about what that means for
That would be a
fuel.
crazy race.
I don't know how fast they go. I don't watch, but just think about the.
It'd be an hour.
Probably
Ted.
take an hour.
Exactly 1 hour. Well, just think about how much activity you have, and the analogy here is if you like don't drive the car all that much, then you don't put a lot of fuel back in that car. So again, if you're someone that works at an office and you sit for 10 hours a day and your only form of exercise is like walking to your car and then walking back from your car into the office and then vice versa, like home, like your fueling needs to be a lot different from someone like yourself who's training for, 2, 3, 4 hours a day, depending on what you have kind of on your docket. And just knowing that like quality matters in both circumstances, but the quantity is going to be vastly different for this person versus that person. So I always like the SNAP diet I think that's a great way to do that. And if you've never heard of that before, you just ask anyone who's looking for advice, take a photo of what they're eating for 3 days or 5 days or however long you think is necessary to get an idea of how they're eating. And hopefully they can have some sort of like a scale there. So it's like, I don't know, it's like a banana on their plate or a slice of bread or whatever is on there, so you can get an idea of how much food is there. And then you can have the conversation about, I'd stem very similarly about how much protein is being eaten, how often are they eating? What are they eating? And if you notice things like, hey, you seem to eat every like 90 minutes, it's because everything's highly processed and your blood sugar is just doing this all day, every day. So, I really like to start with the baseline first. And then once I've established that baseline, we talk about simple tricks or simple things to think about when going to the grocery store. Because if you overcomplicate it, it's going to get adhered to for a week and then it's going to be so stressful they don't do it anymore. So simple things like, don't buy it if it didn't have a face or grow in the earth, or shop around the border of the grocery store, or things of that nature seem to go a long ways towards simplifing things. So
Born in the earth. I like that.
We're had a face or we can come from the earth.
Out of the ground.
If one of those two things isn't real and you probably shouldn't be eating it, then I always make the excuse of you can buy seltzer water in the center of the grocery store and coffee, but outside of that, stay away from that. And that simplification seems to go a long way. And we've had people at both of our gyms, lose 20, 50, 100 pounds, just simply making basic dietary changes because they're just going to be able to keep doing them because they are simple. If they start to add lots of layers of complexity, that's where things become overwhelming and then people just go back into their old habits.
Yeah, the paradox of being underfed is something that I don't think a lot of people understand. Obviously, this idea of calories in, calories out is both real and very nuanced. But your ceiling, the ceiling for your metabolic rate, and a lot of CrossFitters can understand this. We literally call our workouts metabolic conditioning. Your ceiling stays extremely low when you're underfed. So if I'm underfed and I go next door and I do a workout, I cannot push myself to a place that a well-fed athlete can. Therefore, I cannot increase my basal metabolic rate. So you have just this idea of staying stuck in limbo all of the time. If you are well-fed, yes, you are putting more calories into your body, but you give your body the fuel necessary to burn more calories. If you're over there and you feel like absolute crap and you're slogging through something, guess what? Not only are you not increasing your ceiling and your fitness, you're stressing your body out to a point where going back and being underfed again, you're not going to be able to recover. So you're just in this perpetual state of rotating through being underfed, not being able to push in workouts, having a low metabolic, basal metabolic rate. If all those things together just keep you stuck in this mode. You have to have enough gas in the tank to create someone who has, the metabolic rate of somebody like Austin, like the sort of thing where it's like, the candy that you have in your pocket right now is probably for him.
No.
For me.
Okay.
He already ate his candy. He, like you, has zero self-control when things are there. So
But I don't.
Regardless of how big the bag of jelly beans is,
He's eating it.
Yeah. I relate.
It has to disappear. I'm like, why don't you just put it in the cabinet? He's like, no, I need to eat it all right this second.
It's calling me.
Or else I'll eat it tomorrow. I'm like, well, what's wrong with you having some today and some tomorrow? He's like,
I don't understand that either,
can't
Caroline.
do it.
Can you explain that to me? How does that work?
I have pretty good self-control because I really like food. I love food so much, and I see it okay, if I have the white chocolate bunny that I get every year for Easter, I'll I'll eat an ear and I'll put it in the freezer. Next day I can have the other ear, put it in the freezer. The day after that, I can have maybe the foot. I stretch it out to a point where I get to enjoy a little bit until it disappears. And if it's small enough, I don't have to log it. It doesn't,
Oh,
sorry,
interesting.
Mike. But if it's big enough, then I'll log it. But if it's small enough, then I don't.
I'll say we have a 48-hour rule in my house. If it stays in my house for more than 48 hours, it's free game. I don't care whose it is.
And yes, it does get to a point where I'll just
that.
hoard. I'll just hoard.
So it's not actually a rule.
Candy.
My wife hates that is what you just said.
Yeah.
I'll hoard candy in the freezer and at the year mark, I'm like, all right, just throw it away. I won't eat it. But
Did you hear that?
I would feel way worse if I just he drinks bags of jelly beans.
Yeah, I
support
get
this
asked
decision.
what's wrong with you. If I want to tip the chip bag back, or I'm obsessed with. I love moon
Listen,
cheese.
I paid for the calories. I'm gonna eat them. All right.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe I'm just jealous that I can't do that.
I feel judged when I'm dumping chip crumbs into my
Beard.
gullet.
Into my beard.
Yeah. Henry loves it though because it's all over my
Well,
shirt.
what you were describing though is something I definitely felt recently, trying to now put calories throughout the day as opposed to kind of the back half. It was a little bit of that, like not having that like extra gear. You know, if we go out to the gym and do a send piece and like wondering why before I think I could have done 8 of these and now I'm like 4 or 5 of them and wondering why I'm burning out. And I think this is something that often that happens to a CrossFit athlete is like the balance between performance and like how you look. Like there's a big element to that too, because you know, you will look fitter if you are underfed and look a little bit leaner. But if you go and look at the athletes that perform the best year in and year out, they aren't always the leanest athlete.
Most of them aren't.
And that's specifically so they can have the fuel they need on their body to be able to perform across, you know, a grueling weekend like the CrossFit Games. So it's a very interesting thing that I've started to experiment with myself. I mean, like, it's okay if you're, you know, a couple of pounds heftier than you were, if that means you can push a little bit more in Metcons, because I'm more concerned with how my body is performing than how my body looks. And I feel like that's unfortunate that too many people feel more on the right-hand side of like, how does my body look versus how does it perform?
Any CrossFit athlete that I see that is borderline bodybuilder ripped, I am assuming that they're underfed. The person that is not underfed that looks like that is the exception to the rule and not really on the radar. Not really like trying to give that person advice. But like, I'm talking a lot of really high level athletes. You see it happen to them over the course of a weekend. They start out hot and then they go there. I remember last year, you know, at Granite Games, there were a handful of athletes and Hunter and I were just sort of talking about like, that person could really use a sandwich right now. And then another event would go by and it's like, I think it's like 3 or 4 sandwiches now. And then by the end of the weekend, it's like, will somebody get this guy somebody get this kid a Happy Meal? Will somebody get this guy one of those 6-foot subs from Subway? Like,
Is Blimpy still around? I fucking love Blimpy. Is Blimpy still around, Ted?
Ted's ears perked up over
Jersey
there.
Mike's pretty good.
Ted was the sandwich artist at Blimpy back in the day.
Artiste.
All right, Misfits, just a quick break to shout out our show sponsors and hopefully save you a little bit of money on our favorite products. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Sharpen the Axe. You can head to sharpentheaxeco.com, use the code word Carol, CAROL, to save on the Misfit Semifinals collection shirts. The Misfit Space Invaders are coming to a semifinal near you to burn it down, and they need your help. Make sure you head to sharpentheaxeco.com and buy one or all of the shirts to support these athletes and their coaches getting to semifinals. They work their ass off all year long and could use your support, and we appreciate it. They appreciate it. Sharpentheaxeco.com. Use the code word Carol.
We are also brought to you by Proper Fuel. You could head to properfuel.co, use the code word Misfit to save a little bit of dough on your order. I'm about to head out for vacation, which means I'm packing a whole bunch of those Proper single serves so I don't have to carry around a gigantic jug of Proper along with all the other trash that I'm bringing down to South America. I don't even know if they'll let me in with a giant jug of protein, but they're definitely going to let me in with a bunch of single serves. You're also going to see the Misfits slinging single serves left and right come semifinals. It's going to be a long but fun 4 weekends of travel, but those single serves will get you through your vacation, your semifinal, whatever it is that you're getting after. And of course, the standard recovery and pre-workout jugs, all on properfuel.co. Use the code word Misfit to save.
Finally, we're brought to you by ourselves, Misfit Athletics and Team Misfit. If you are looking for the programming that Caroline follows, you can head to misfitathletics.com or the SugarWOD Marketplace for a 2-week free trial. Common question we get is like, what separates Misfit from other competitors? There's all kinds of different competitors out there. They all have their own program. What makes you guys special, unique? What's really cool about this time of year with the comp block 1, 2, and 3, and honestly throughout the year, is our variable training system. You have the opportunity to address your own specific weaknesses day in and day out with the goal of trying to narrow the gap between where you are and where you want to be. Conversely, you're a Misfit or a potential Misfit affiliate looking for programming for your gym, and you want to know what Drew, Hunter, or myself follow, you can head to Team Misfit or the SugarWOD Marketplace for a 2-week free trial. Right now, we're in the midst of trying to turn a 1-rep max deadlift into a 3-rep max deadlift. Hunter and I had to pull some beefy weights today, and I am not feeling okay.
Actually beefy.
See if I can sit through the rest of this podcast safely. Again, you can head to Misfit Athletics or the SugarWOD Marketplace for a 2-week free trial for your individual programming needs, or to teammisfit.com or the SugarWOD Marketplace for your affiliate programming needs. All right, back to the show.
Time. The one before moving on to Hunter, the one other thing that I want to put out there, because I think the best thing that I learned from the early days of CrossFit was that we had all of these modalities that we were chasing, and what was really pushed before there were all of these different programming companies and people were profiting off this was, I want to know what the running expert thinks about running. I want to know what the powerlifting expert thinks about powerlifting. It was really funny because all these communities hated us, but we were learning from them. They were essentially our coaches. And then we had to sort of bring it all back together and see what it meant. But when you do that and you have that open mind about things, you can pull the bits and pieces from all of these different places to really make up your own knowledge and what makes the most sense for how you give advice, how you eat yourself. And when we are talking about calories in, calories out, when we're talking about higher fat or how much protein should you eat, we don't have to politicize these things. We can take this information in from every single really smart person that has these, insanely polarizing opinions on certain topics. We can bring all of them in together and figure out what they mean. Yes, calories in, calories out is real. It does matter. But like Caroline already addressed, what percentage of your calories are protein? Our body needs a full amino acid profile to go into muscle protein synthesis. That's what we do when we break muscle tissue down and then build it back up. Almost every person, unless you're from an Inuit tribe, needs a fairly high amount of glucose to be able to have your brain and body work on a certain level. To get the correct hormone production, a lot of us need a significant amount of fat for it to happen. So with all of these pieces coming together, you can really figure out, again, what sort of advice you're trying to give others, and then you can personalize what you're doing for yourself. But the idea that we have to decide whether we are, if it fits your macros, calories in, calories out, the laws of thermodynamics do not apply to the human body, so that's all a farce. It's bullshit. If you eat sugar, you're going to die. You don't have to latch yourself onto these ideas and be on a team when it comes to this. You can take in a ton of information and pull out the really good ideas that you get from all of these. Again, so many of these people are PhDs and really intelligent. They just decide though that their snippet of information is the only one that you're allowed to have and everybody else is wrong. So just, again, I think just because of the quote unquote political climate or whatever in the United States, we just so much trend towards I'm on team carb, I'm on team fat. My aunt's yelling at me about protein's gonna, your kidney's gonna fall out or whatever.
Salt? How can you live with that much salt?
For real, salt's a whole nother.
We started.
I'll make mine fairly quick because you all hit elements that I would tell any athlete. The one. There's a couple things. One, you have to identify whether the snacks. You have to talk. Whoever you're talking
Ted just
to
wants you to move your microphone out of the way if you start snacking.
You have to, whoever you're speaking with. If I'm me talking as the coach, whoever I'm talking to, you have to understand what the goals of the person are. We've talked a little bit about kind of eating for performance. Eating for, whereas, Drew maybe a little bit more eating for the health side. And those two things are different. They're obviously, like you're saying, elements of the two that do cross over. But when we're thinking about eating for performance, someone like Caroline and the training volume that they do, that is quite a bit different. Another thing that I find fairly frequently, and this is probably more common with affiliate athletes, is that a lot of people don't, you as a coach assume when you're saying hey, how much protein, fat, carbs are you eating? There are a lot of people who don't know what that means. There's a and that's not on them. That's just like a
Is butter a carb?
Result of the a result of the the how we are educated when it comes to things like nutrition, and we are still living in a current time where a large portion of the population grew up with the old food pyramid saying like that 100% of your calories need to come from pasta, bread, and if you eat a piece of meat, your cholesterol is going to make you fall into the
pasta,
ground.
Though?
Fucking love me some pasta. It's still in there somewhere. Okay, but we've got people who have varying experience levels with as far as like what they were told and what was ingrained in them as what is healthy, what is defined as healthy. Obviously, like as more, I think we are trending in the right direction when it comes to like overall recommendations for diet. Seems like there are more educated medical professionals and whatnot that are reading the research that's like, no, it's like, turns out that cholesterol isn't all that bad for you, that sort of thing. But the bottom line, the commonality there is the education piece. So whoever you're talking to, like, have a litmus test for like, hey, do you know what protein, fats, and carbs are? Like, or if you don't even want to like risk insulting them, just give a couple examples, that sort of thing, so that they have an idea of like what you're talking about. And then the other element is that I find more often than not is that those athletes coming to you, whether it's for performance or for, let's say, weight loss or fat loss, is that they're under eating. Like, and a lot of that is just someone will ask for, hey, can you give me macros, or can we talk about food? I will tell them like, yep, you need to record everything that you eat for a week. Use MyFitnessPal is the one that I usually direct people towards. I know you do the photo thing, whatever, but someone's like, yeah, I'll record it for a day. And it's like, nope, I want like a full week that crosses over the weekend. I need to see like on average, like what you're eating. And more often than not, like the quantity of food is an issue. And like we said, if you're fueling for performance and you don't have the quantity of food, you just bonk. The performance isn't there. If you're fueling for weight loss and the calories aren't there in like a significant deficit, that's additional stress that you're putting on your body when you're asking it to perform, mentally or physically, and that the fuel just isn't there to provide you with that support. That stress is something that's going to just signal to your body like, yeah, we need to hold on to the things that are actually coming into our body and not let them go. And a lot of times those are the people who are, trying to lose body fat specifically.
So to tie this all back into the Misfit Project, the idea here is that we are hopefully addressing our personal relationships, getting outside, getting some sunlight, fresh air, moving around a little bit, making sure that sleep is a priority, dealing with stress management, understanding the things that do stress our bodies and minds out, some of the things that sort of, fill the tank back up. When we bring ourselves to that point and then address nutrition, that's when people are really going to be able to start, sort of being back in control of what's going on. If you are constantly stressed out because of your personal relationships, you're sleeping like shit, you aren't dealing with any of that stress at all, the idea that you're going to be able to make really good decisions about, with your mood being all over the place, with your blood sugar being all over the place, to make really good decisions in your fuel isn't all that realistic. So again, to tie it all back in, that's sort of how this process starts to make sense. And now we're going to talk about movement, which is kind of a funny one to talk about on a CrossFit type podcast, but I have some pretty strong opinions on what this means and what baseline sort of stuff is before we even touch on Sherb's 2115 nining.
Gotta go. Is there
all
a
right
line here? Dumbbell. Stat.
With our minds and bodies primed and properly fueled, it's time to develop a
Didn't
movement
work.
practice.
Fucking nerd.
The basis for this is largely based on consistency and diversity of movement. Our first goal is to reduce long bouts of sedentary behavior as much as possible. With a solid base of low-intensity movement throughout the day, we then take our pursuits to diversify our movement as much as possible. If you take affiliate class and you go really hard, and every other moment of your day is sedentary, and you have a friend who works does manual labor, or just is cognizant enough to take a bunch of walks throughout the day, whatever, there is a really good chance that they will end up, in terms of longevity, being in a better spot than you. There is definitely a thing in American society for sure, and I'm sure in other places, parts of the world as well, where we get obsessed with, again, these politicizing, whether, what's the macronutrient I'm not allowed to eat for the next 3 years before I switch it, and then what's the exercise regime that I have to go all in on for 10, 20, 30, 40 minutes a day, instead of let's start with eating real food, and let's start with the human body was not designed to sit still for long periods of time. That to me is the baseline of where this comes from. It's got a name now. It's called non-exercise movement. There are a lot of people that are, wearing the Fitbit, Apple Watch, pedometer, all that. But that to me is the baseline. And I really like telling people that, because that's a lot more digestible for some people than, like, for instance, you talking to someone that you went to college or high school with, and they're like, you guys are fucked, man. You guys are crazy. You're climbing ropes and hitting tires with sledgehammers and all that. And it's like, okay, before we go there, before you buy a rower and don't use it and ask me for rowing programming, do you go for walks? Like, do you move around a bunch? Are you just sitting there staring at your computer, then sitting in your car, then sitting on your couch, then laying down on your bed, but somewhere mixed in there, you don't want to go in and, really get after it? Why the fuck would you want to get after it? You never move. Your body's like, what the hell are you doing? Why are you doing this to me? I feel like shit. My knee's going to break. My ankle's going to break. My low back hurts. All these different things. Yeah. When you don't move, your body turns into basically a solid piece, one solid piece. And then you're asked to deadlift, clean and jerk, whatever. Like, no, that doesn't make any sense at all.
Yeah, I'll start.
Good. I figured that you were. Thank you.
You could have just talked and not told us.
No, announce it every time.
I looked around. Yeah,
I will be speaking now.
Yeah, I am speaking now. That's also part of the conversation, kind of going off of the food. Most of the time when an affiliate athlete, asks about eating, what do I need to do to meet this goal? It usually is like the obvious thing is like, what am I eating? The other thing is just that. It's hey, what do you do for work? It's like a lot of folks sit at a desk. They're in a cubicle, very traditional kind of corporate job. And we talk about it all the time, just like the other 23 hours. We talk about that with Misfit Athletics too, even though that, most of those folks it's more like the other 20 hours.
There are a lot of high level competitors that could be much better if they didn't just park it when they're not exercising.
Yeah. And it's like, what do you do? Are you moving around? Do you get up? Do you walk around a little bit throughout the day? Usually that's a no, which also means they're staying indoors the entire time. Like all of these concepts that we talked about mostly on the last podcast, like all of these can get tied together pretty quickly. Like grab a friend and go for a 10-minute walk and you're hitting like, 4 out of the 5 boxes sort of thing. But the non-exercise movement piece is just, it's just reminding folks that yes, when you kind of zoom in on that 1 hour affiliate class, like it's something that like I think about quite a bit. It's like, fuck, especially when we have the lift only days. Like today we had the 2 sets of 15 and then some accessory work. And it's like, while I genuinely believe that like over the long term, somebody who does that style of programming, kind of that GPP style, is going to get fitter on average, but there are always those days where I'm like, man, I see 50-60% of my class who's like, this is the only movement that they're going to get all day. And it's like, it's part of the reason, like, yeah, that warm up might've been a little bit excessive. Like, yep, that cool down walk didn't need to be that long, but it's going to, not because I actually think you need to cool down for that long, but because like, I know that this might be the only movement that you're doing when you come to the gym. And if someone forces you to do it, that's my job sort of thing. But the fact is that a lot of folks just, if it's assumed that it's 1 hour of fitness, which is kind of funny because, again, we tout as like, hey, that's all you need. And it is when it comes to
Fitness.
snatch, clean,
Exercise
and jerk,
movement.
snatch, clean and jerk, row, run, that sort of thing. But, again, like you said, humans weren't designed to sit around, try really hard for what ends up being, 15 to 30 minutes a day, and then just do absolutely nothing the rest of the time.
Yeah, when someone comes to me asking what else they can do outside of the CrossFit class, because that's a pretty common question after people kind of get matriculated into class, they come 2, 3, 4 days a week, and they're like, all right, like, I'm really finding that I like this stuff. How do I get better at it? And I'm like, do you go outside and walk for like 30 minutes on the days that you don't come here? Like, no, it's rest day. I rest. It's like, try doing that. Try just doing something for 20 to 30 minutes, once or twice a week on top of your 3 or 4 days of CrossFit. And those people often come back to me like, man, I'm less sore than I was before. Or like, I weirdly have more energy than I used to have when I was doing fewer days of exercise. And, people don't realize the value in just moving. One of the things I thought was really cool about the Misfit Project stuff that we used to post a while back was like, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but 20 to 30 minute walk is more effective than metformin, like the leading diabetes drug, in terms of like controlling your blood sugar. And people who walked sleep on average, I think it was like another hour and a half or 2 hours longer than people who don't sleep or don't walk for 20, 30 minutes a day. And thinking about how much that would change your life if you just did those walks, you got better control of your blood sugar, which is the thing that's like plaguing our country right now in terms of health. And then you have, all right, I don't sleep well, which means I'm irritable. I don't want to be around people. I'm making worse food choices. I'm less likely to exercise. Like, think about what that does for you and how low the barrier to entry is there. A beginner comes to the gym after their first class. I'm like, I'm sorry to tell you this, but you're going to be sore. Like, sorry, it's inevitable that you are going to feel 100% tomorrow. But the worst thing you can do for yourself is to sit on your couch all day. If you can find the means to go for a 30-minute walk, I promise you'll feel better when you come in for session number 2. And the ones that listen to that come back and like, I was a little sore, but the walk seemed to really help. And when it comes to just health-based stuff and in this regard, like, don't get me wrong, fitness is awesome, but you should be out doing things. That's how you have experiences. That's how you can do what you said, like check the boxes of being around other people and getting sunlight and making sure your sleep is better. So the nice part about this is the barrier to entry is so low. And it doesn't need to be some daunting, like, you need to go walk for 3 hours. It's like, walk 10 minutes in the morning. At lunch, walk for 10 minutes. And then before bed, after dinner, maybe you go for another 10-minute walk with your significant other. And all of a sudden, you've gotten 30 extra minutes that you needed to get. And wow, you sleep better. You feel better. And that, to me, is the easiest way to convince someone to do something, is when they can feel different doing it. The hard part, like any of this stuff, is just getting started.
What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree with everything that those two said. And I think that there's so much that comes with just going for a walk. Like, somebody who works in an office or whatever, if they can get themselves out there are so many more benefits just from getting fresh air, getting some sunlight, even if it is for 10 minutes, to where like you do recognize at the end of the day, like, hey, maybe you had more energy by, 3 p.m. when you were closing your computer and heading home, or maybe you went to sleep a little bit easier. And that's something that I found a lot on my rest days, because, like, train hard all week, and then Thursday comes around and it's like, okay, this is my freebie to kind of just not do anything. But in reality, it didn't feel great. Like, by the end of the day, when you're just there every once in a while, like, sure, maybe I'm burnt out and I just need to not do anything or have anything on my to-do list. But the days that I do, which I've started, on my rest days, just try to keep moving and, take a longer walk or whatever. I do feel a lot better, not only like at the end of the day, but going into the next training day. And I think a lot of that has to do with just like the stimulus of being outside and moving, and not feeling like, in the back of your mind, and not everybody experiences this, but like a little bit of guilt to not not doing anything.
Yeah.
For me, like, at the end of the day, if I look back and I'm like, wow, I didn't do anything, like, saying that, like, Austin's always very supportive. I'm like, well, maybe you didn't need to do anything. Like, your body probably needed a break. And I'm like, fuck you, I didn't do anything. Like, I feel like shit.
Throat punch.
So yeah, I think that, like, it's very low barrier to entry, and if you just give it a shot, like you can see like almost immediately, like, oh, okay, I walked to the mailbox. Cool. I feel a little bit better. What if I walk to the other person's mailbox? Like just getting
Don't fucking touch my mailbox.
Increase a mailbox every day. Like if you're having trouble with it.
Mailbox Monday.
Yeah, Mailbox Monday. But yeah, I think that movement portion is so underutilized for a lot of people. And unfortunately, a lot of it does have to do with, they get up, they get their kids ready, they put them on the school bus, they get in their car, they go to work, they have a to-do list that's a mile long, and they can't justify taking that break. And then by the end of the day, it's time to pack up, go pick up their kid, bring them to soccer, go home, and like repeat over and over and over again. And I think it kind of comes down to the concept of helping people understand that like those things that you're doing for yourself and your mental health and all that isn't selfish. And it's been kind of ingrained in a lot of people and parents these days that like they don't matter anymore. They have kids and they need to do everything for them. And whether you have kids or not, like I do think that even just in like the office job, typical office job, like you are there to make everybody else's lives easier or, whatever. And maybe you don't have energy at the end of the day to do anything other than eat, sleep, and repeat. And it's just kind of like that vicious circle that people really can't get out of.
Yeah, the Hunter's talked about this in class in a few different ways before over at the gym, but there's some research on the percentage of parents that are willing to die for their children in a scenario where they have to like push them out of the way of a car or like, whatever scenario you dream up while you're in the shower, about saving someone's life, sacrificing your own, whatever it is. And that percentage increases dramatically when it is, your child. The inverse number is very much the amount of people who are willing to quote unquote live for their children. The idea that we talk about how all of this comes back around to this symbiosis of physical health and mental health, and that you won't be a better parent if you take time for yourself to put yourself in a really good spot physically and mentally is wrong. It's not correct. So the idea of living for your kids is probably a lot more reasonable and realistic than deciding about the 1 in a trillion chance that, again, your kid's falling off a cliff and you throw them and you have to fall or whatever you're trying to come up with. Like the funny thing is I can't even come up with enough scenarios.
I come up with these all the time. They're terrible. Don't have kids if you don't want to have those scenarios in your head. They're terrible.
But again, the idea of, that's whatever the ultimate sacrifice, but it's one of those things that takes place in probably a split second versus are you willing to work on yourself as a human being consistently so that you're providing a really good experience, example, whatever for your children is incredibly important.
The easiest way I explain this to people when they come up with that same thing, because we've had people who drop from the gym because like I just can't afford to give you guys 3 hours of my week. And
I feel like that's the number one conversation you have with people who are like, hey, I need to put my membership on hold because XYZ, and it's usually has to do with their schedule, their kid's schedule, can't do this, can't do that.
And what I say to them is that, do you think your kid would trade 3 hours a week for 15 extra years of your life? To have you around for 15 more years, do you think they'd be okay with 3 hours a week? And everyone's like, yeah, obviously, of course they would. I want to be there for weddings and graduations and births of like, future generations. And I'm like, that's all we're doing right here. I know it's difficult and it's, you probably don't always like doing the thrusters and the burpees and the rowing intervals, but like you will be there for a longer time, which means you get to experience more things, which is always the thing I talk about when I get someone new to the gym is like what the gym is all about. It's allowing you to refine your life so that you can experience more things, because as we age, if we don't move, we had a camp recently and the quote came out that motion is lotion, but like if you aren't moving your body will stiffen up and you will fucking die. So the idea here is if you can convince yourself to move and be there, you will now be able to experience more things in your life so you aren't missing these things that, I'm sure we've all had a relative who's like, go on without me, I'll be here when you get back. And I don't want anyone to have that experience. Yeah. And if something as simple as a couple of walks a week can make a huge difference, then I'm going to suggest that. And before we move away from this, I can't believe I didn't take the opportunity to like talk about someone like Kim. I have a client who is down over 130 pounds. She trains with me for 30 minutes twice a week. That's all the CrossFit she does every single week. Every other day though, she walks between 3 and 6 miles. And she never does it all at once. It's always a mile here, a mile and a half there, 2 miles there. And she's literally lost 130 pounds with less than an hour of CrossFit per week, but just moving her bodies on her off day. So if anyone wants to understand the power of what it means to just keep doing simple things over and over again and to get that health that they're achieving. I mean, she has never been this light. She is far and exceeded what her doctor told her was ever possible for her weight loss. She had bariatric surgery, so she had that procedure. They're like, you're only going to get to this weight, and then you should just accept the fact that you'll never be lighter. And I think she's like 70 or 80 pounds past that. So if you're ever wondering what the power of like simple things like walking is, that is a perfect example of it.
Very true.
Great.
The other thing that I think could resonate with people is just the idea that your body is amazing at responding to stimulus. It's just like, it doesn't matter what the stimulus is. So if you do sit still and do nothing, your body is assuming that something is so wrong that it needs to go into survival mode and burn as few calories as possible and like hold on to absolutely everything that it can. And that's why, again, the calories outside of calories in, calories out is so nuanced. Everything is taken into consideration in your life in terms of energy expenditure, but that could be like a plus or a minus. And I think the guy ended up winning the Nobel Peace Prize, but the doctor that figured out what lipoprotein lipase is basically just if your muscle contracts in any way, like right now, just, moving my leg back and forth, it doesn't have to be like a back squat or a bicep curl or something like that. It's an enzyme that's released in your body that essentially uses stored body fat to be able to energize what you're doing. So it's like, oh, that's incredible. I literally only need to move for this to happen. Well, yeah, like when you move, your body burns calories, and that's what, again, creates this whole equation. But if you don't move, it doesn't. It thinks you're doing it on purpose. It thinks you are deciding, I don't need to move. We're in whatever famine times, or, I broke both of my legs and I'm laying in the cave, waiting for my legs not to be broken anymore, like that sort of thing. So your body is
any day now, these won't be broken.
So incredible
Any day now.
at responding to stimulus, but you can trick it. It doesn't understand our modern lifestyles and just the idea of like planting, like, okay, this is what I'm doing. The in-between here that I think should be addressed is this concept of, your zone 2 type of situation, your Maffetone method. If you are a regular listener to this podcast, you'll chuckle. We have talked about this many a time, but especially for someone like myself, I trend towards enjoying a heavier lift or a higher skill gymnastics or a higher output on a machine for a shorter period of time. And I'm big into, again, studying all of these people that give out advice. And one of the things that was posted recently by somebody that I follow and, sort of trust as a source, Dr. Peter Attia, he's very much into, like, he's the guy, if you're like a billionaire and you want to live until you're 193, like you go see him and it's like this supplement and this protocol and whatever. And he's always posting about the science behind these things and what helps you improve. And then the other day he posted one where it was the effect on all-cause mortality of by VO2 max. And it far and away exceeds any other suggestion that he has for any person. He does not have any data that can support this supplement or doing this thing or getting in this sauna, whatever it is. All of these different things that move the needle for you do not even remotely, they're like a drop of water in an ocean compared to how long you live based on your VO2 max. So for me personally, I know that the missing part of the equation is spending a shitload of time under my aerobic threshold so that these energy systems can come back together and sort of coalesce a little bit. So I have to spend 3 to 4 hours a week doing zone 2 type training. And it can be challenging coming from a sports background when you're running an 11.5-minute mile and it doesn't even feel like you're exercising, to say, like, I want to live longer. Like, this is the same part of, what you're talking about. I don't like going on a hike with a bunch of other CrossFitters and feeling like I'm fucking dying and blaming it on my dog that I have to rest and stop.
I'm not I don't know how this is a thing, but I'm not great at hiking. Like
The first
I go up any
10
sort
minutes
of incline, and I feel like
of a hike is the hardest shit ever. Like you have that moment where you rest, because like I would have so many people come visit me in college, and we would go for a hike, and they're at altitude and they've flown from sea level. So I'm like, we're gonna hike for about 10 minutes, and then we're gonna rest for like 10 or 20 minutes. It's funny, I was doing the Maffetone method warm up way back then. I didn't even know. Because if they thought they had to keep going, they would literally quit. They'd be like, I can't breathe, I'm gonna die. Like for me, for you, for everyone, that first 10 minutes, because you can't really like pace it. You know, you got that incline. So I would always have people, we would choose a specific, I'd know the spot on the hike where we could like pull off and hang out for a little bit and then start hiking again. And no matter what fitness level they were at, they were like, when they started walking, and they're like, oh, I'm okay.
Yeah, I learned that at Ted's bachelor party.
nice.
We went for like a hike, and I was like, oh, fuck these guys. They're all slow. I'll run ahead and I get like 1 foot ahead of them and be like, all right, I'll see you guys when I'm recovered, because it is a real thing. I was like, I'm tougher than altitude.
It is. So moving from non-exercise movement to making sure that before we go super intense exercise, and that's the only thing that we care about, we have to also have that in-between sort of thing. And I think that is a really good segue into how someone could go from 0 to CrossFitter. You know, you get whatever, couch to 5K, that sort of thing. And why people that come in with the aerobic background, yes, they're a little bit more frustrated about their 1 rep max or their skill set, but they belong in a CrossFit gym like immediately. They're running with people in class. You know, once they learn the efficiency on the machines, they're right there with those people. And the reason why they have such an easier time acclimating is because that aerobic base, you know, it encompasses just so much of what fitness really is. Whereas that like top end speed or like pushing that anaerobic portion is a much smaller piece of the pie.
Yeah, when someone comes into the gym in that regard, it's really important to me that they go and find a gym that like understands that part of their fitness journey, because, you know, for years CrossFit got a bad rap for being this like ultra intense program, and as it rightly should be for people who are ready for that, there's an intermediate step between like, I don't do any exercise and I'm trying to do what Caroline does. And unfortunately, I think the lesson on mechanics, consistency, intensity, that kind of spectrum of taking an athlete from brand new to like experienced CrossFitter happens at a rate that's too fast for a lot of people, and that can cause burnout and injury in a circumstance where it could have been done much smarter if had they been taken and, you know, the coach held the reins a little bit tighter. So if you're someone that's kind of in that circumstance, I would really urge you to try to go find a gym that's around you that has a, you know, very good reputation for having a diverse population, because those are the gyms that can take, you know, someone like my client Kim, who wants to lose hundreds of pounds, and someone who like Caroline that wants to go to the CrossFit game. They can both kind of train in the same space because the trainers there at both spaces understand, hey, this is where you are right now, and I know this is where you want to be. Here is a realistic plan to get you from here to there that isn't just like keep trying that until you can't do that. Because I think that's an experience that a lot of us had early on in CrossFit, because we were figuring it out for ourselves. We were watching the Windows Media Player videos that were like 14 seconds long with someone doing like rowing intervals or like how to do a snatch and whatnot. So, you know, I think the big piece here is trying to find a location and find a group of people in your area that will take you on a journey that is like what they call the low trajectory to a distant horizon. That is going to be the best play for you if you are looking to try to make some noticeable changes in your health. Because again, walking before you run is a really good way to make sure that you are building the foundation to eventually be a much healthier version of yourself.
Literally.
True. All right. Last but not least, personalization. A concerted effort to incorporate community, fresh air, rest, peace of mind, nutrient density, and movement into your life will move mountains for just about anyone. With that being said, it's always important to audit our habits from time to time and find ways to make sure they truly fit for the long haul. Just as we all share so many traits from our evolutionary biology, we are also rather unique in many ways and have to be diligent about adjusting protocols to fit ourselves specifically. Really important concept. Obviously, we've given examples already of what is sort of personalized about what we do, the way we do it. You know, a lot of it's about going through that journey and getting, I don't know, almost generic protocols and then altering them to fit who you are. But at the end of the day, this is the mind of an immature coach nutrition coach, mentor, whatever, is the person who writes down your protocol and just says, there, do it. I said so. I know what I'm doing. Versus let's get some nuance into it. Let's understand who your client is. Who's this person that you're trying to help? What's their past history? What are their goals? How did they react to this thing that you thought was going to be perfect for them? Maybe it wasn't, that sort of thing. And I think that's why it's, so common for people to work with a nutrition coach and have something really profound happen versus like, I can get those numbers on a calculator online and slide them up and down a little bit, right? Like you can go download our program. If you don't join the Discord and talk to people about what's going on, you don't watch those videos, you don't get remote coaching. It's not the same thing. It's not even remotely close to the same thing, right? So when you're dealing with this stuff and you're trying to figure all of it out, make sure that whoever is helping you or whoever you are helping, really understands these ideas of how to truly personalize these things. I'm going to put you guys on the spot, but one thing that you personally do that helps you that you would not give as generic advice to a client.
You would not give?
Yeah.
What do you mean that helps me?
So you've gone down through this list and you have all these protocols that you do, and you've arrived at one that might be off the beaten path. It might be super advanced, whatever, but it's not in your repertoire of, I don't know you very well, here's your general information. So like an example would be, fasted versus not fasted, something to that extent. Are you going to tell someone right off the bat that they shouldn't eat for half of the day, but maybe you don't eat for half, that sort of thing. You have a certain exercise protocol, but that someone should start with non-exercise movement, whatever, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I wouldn't send someone into a CrossFit gym right off the bat if they've never done exercise at all. Where my mind was going as you were doing that entire thing was, what would I want to tell someone when they're looking
Misfit
to try
Gym
to...
Portland, you can come. We got you. No
I got you. I'm qualifying this statement, but the thing that I was like, my gears were spinning as you were saying that is like, if you were looking to have someone help you, the step one is making sure they seem genuinely interested in you and they take information about you, because you're right. I can't give anybody really good advice until I get to know them as a person. So trying to make sure that we get a little bit of a background of like, what's your health history look like? What's your relationship with like your family? What's your relationship with like food? What have you done in the past for exercise? What do you currently like to do? What do you have goals in mind? Things of that nature are kind of the baseline for making sure that you kind of get to know the person ahead of time. And then I would tell them like, they don't need to get super wrapped up in what the like nitty gritty details of what their training should be. They just need to be moving their body often enough that they're, getting the things that we've talked about in this podcast. They're getting fresh air. They're getting out in sunshine. They're finding someone maybe they like to go walking with. They, have the opportunity to have those conversations that make deeper connections. So they have like that reason or that desire to like go out and do these things. So, actually it was a pretty common question the other day from actually Mark was in the gym, and he was talking to Chris and I about the Maffetone stuff. And he's like, should I like do this if I don't have a heart rate monitor yet? I was like, yes, you absolutely should still do Maffetone if you don't have a heart rate monitor yet. He's like, well, how do I know if I don't have the exact number? How do I know this is helping me at all? And I'm just like, if you take the advice,
think biking for 45 minutes isn't going to help you?
Well, I'm just thinking about this. Is like, I don't know if I'm gonna be in the right zone, or maybe I'm not getting the intended benefit. I'm like, if you bike for 45 minutes and you stick to like the general guideline of like, you
don't
can answer,
ever try that hard.
Yeah, you don't have to try that hard, and you like wouldn't want to have like a 10-minute conversation with someone, but you could answer a question. Like, if that's enough, like, go and do that, and don't try to create some ridiculous stipulation that if you can't have these 7 things happen, then it's not worth doing. And I think that paralyzes a ton of people. Is there's, I don't have these 3 things, so what's the point of starting? And it's like, just start.
So I would qualify that as what I call a college essay answer. Yeah. You gave a answer to a question, just not my question.
That's what I did in the SATs.
I made a living on bullshitting inside of the Blue Book. So I understand going that route, but I'm talking about specifically something that you have personalized for yourself that wouldn't be within generic advice. The goal of this is for you to talk about how you've made a nuanced choice in some way of what you do. And again, another example would be, I would not recommend almost anybody that I was talking to that they needed to go jog as slow as like deathly slow for 3 hours a week. right? That's something that I have arrived at through going through the different machines, knowing what my personal energy systems are like, that sort of thing.
Fair. I have an answer then, but I'll let somebody else go.
No, go ahead.
One of the things I've been doing with the Maffetone stuff personally is I've been doing.
Don't just repeat my example.
I was to say I've been adding
Let him go.
Carbohydrate supplementation afterwards, and I wouldn't recommend that generally for a lot of people, knowing that like what my training volume looks like and feels like versus like something somebody else would do. Because again, supplementation is a really popular topic when it comes down. As soon as I start exercising, it's like, what are the 17 supplements I need to get better at this stuff? And it's like, no, eat food. Start there. Make sure you have that box checked. And then if after enough time has passed, you're wondering why you're not moving the needle, then we can revisit that conversation. But something that I've been trying recently is to add carbohydrate powder into a drink post zone 2 training to try to replenish like glycogen stores and get myself used to doing that. I'm not going to recommend that for almost anyone. Now, we had this conversation about, we have a nice like shake place that's next door to our second gym in Wyndham, and like, people are like, oh, should I go over and get one after this? I'm like, we did like, 5 200-meter rows. Probably don't need to go slam like 2 shakes right now. Like, go home and cook some dinner and eat that and come back. And, if you come consistently enough and you make enough changes in your body, then yes, we can talk about like why someone would want to go there and start maybe supplementing their diet with something on top of that. But like, let's start with the basics first, as opposed to trying to jump ahead to like, what are the hacks to give me those extra 1%? Start with the 99% first.
Yeah. And the layer that's on that is we can like, let's say the 4 of us and we add a few more people all line up and do a Maffetone session on a C2 bike. There is going to be next to my bike and next to Sherb's bike, a absolute pool of sweat. There are some people that do that and barely sweat at all. And there's that whole sort of
I sweat
spectrum living in there. So Sherb and I definitely need, like, we probably burned more calories, more glycogen, lost a lot more sodium. And that personalization is knowing that if I do this versus, again, somebody else, these are 2 totally different things.
Yeah, so I was gonna say I feel like there's a lot of little things being like a competitor versus like the average affiliate athlete, but I definitely wouldn't tell people to like drink your calories if that's the only way you can get them, because like throughout the day, like the very simple, easy digestible carbs that I need, like post workout or in between workouts, it's like if I need to put some Gatorade powder in water, like that, I'll do it. But I wouldn't recommend that to somebody else who is coming in like, hey, I can't eat carbs right after, my workout. I go to work. I wouldn't say, grab a Gatorade. I think there's a lot of little things that I don't know. It's hard for me to, like, there are so many things in the different lifestyles that, and I don't think there's anything that's concrete, like, oh yeah, definitely don't do that.
I think it's just because it's a gradual thing. You start out as an affiliate member, you start out with the baseline advice, and then it's like, how, as I continue these things changing so much, how can I make changes to them so that it actually fits what I'm doing?
I think there are kind of 2 things that it took me a while to come up with, because I follow a lot of the stuff and I don't think that I go too far in one extreme direction or the other. One of them is that I would say that you don't need to work out like exercise, like CrossFit exercise 7 days a week. And that's something that I do similar to you. And it's not necessarily CrossFit. I consider a Maffetone session, just if that's the only thing I do that day, that's my exercise for the day. If I surf for an hour before I come into work, I constitute that as exercise for the day, but I do something every day. I would say like, hey, going for the walk, the non-exercise movement, like that for somebody relatively, new or just kind of getting into this sort of stuff, I would say like, that's great. That's terrific. But putting the burden on somebody that they need to go to the gym or exercise or do something structured like that 7 days a week is not necessary. And like you said, like you've got someone who's lost over 100 pounds CrossFitting for an hour a week. Whereas, we're doing it for at least 1, sometimes multiple hours a day. The other thing, and this is just kind of more general advice, is that all the things that we've talked about, it can, like, we've filled 3 hours of content of advice theoretically that we're giving to you, the listener. But one of the easiest ways to get overwhelmed by that is to try to implement it all at once. It's taken a long time and I assume all of us, to dial in to what is our current and not even like forever kind of style of this whole concept. But the constant iterative process is very much a thing. And especially when you're getting started, finding, picking that lowest barrier to entry is often the key to kind of just getting your foot in the door. I know that was something that we used to talk about on the Misfit Project podcast a lot. But if it is auditing personal relationships, maybe that's too deep of a rabbit hole, and it's like, I need to get some momentum first, but I can go for a 10-minute walk once a day. It's like, perfect. Go for a 10-minute walk once a day.
And specifically don't invite one person.
And specifically don't invite that one person, or whatever. But the idea is that I think we've all given examples of all of these pillars, meaning that we all have a version of each of these things that we have kind of honed in on, but that came after a long iterative and still continuously self-auditing process. So for somebody just getting into it, it's think back to or listen back to the things and find whichever one is the easiest for you to get your foot in the door, to get that momentum, because there's no point in trying to adopt everything if eventually it's too overwhelming. That's a common thing we see too, is people who get just like I am going to go 100 miles an hour into this, and it's the New Year's resolution kind of concept. It's like, man, the first 2 weeks exercise were great, I'll see you this time next year.
The all or nothing mentality is the kind of thing that you almost want people to go through it a few times.
Yeah.
Because that is the proof that it doesn't work. So maybe the next time people are a bit kinder to themselves when they're starting to add behaviors into their life, as opposed to like, they said these 100 boxes need to be checked off.
Yeah. This stuff is tough too, because you're, as affiliate coaches specifically, you have people who come through the doors that either know of have an idea of what CrossFit is, have a friend who's like transformed themselves or whatever, or just, through research or whatever it is, there's the expectation of that like kind of immediate result, the immediate results and stuff like that. And while that certainly can happen to a certain degree, like the things that we're talking about here it's not like, this month I'm focusing on this, that month I'm focusing on that. Like, this is it's like a full lifestyle thing that we're trying to provide that is intended to, improve all facets of your life, but is also sustainable over the course of your life, not a 30-day nutrition challenge.
I was just going to say, one of the things that always comes to mind when we talk about the all or nothing mentality is the people who would like a nutrition challenge at the gym. It's a common question. It's like, how come we don't do more of these? And while I think there's a lot of lessons that can be taken from a nutrition challenge, the first thing that always happens once the nutrition challenge is over is everyone goes back to eating the exact same way they were beforehand. And there are very rare circumstances where someone begins to adopt that for a lifestyle. So rather than making it like a catchy or a flashy thing that we kind of just talk about, all right, we'll do it with 30 days and see what happens. It's like, no, we should be talking about these things kind of regularly and not making some just ginormous shift from left to right. It's like, no, like if you don't eat vegetables, try eating some vegetables. If you're not eating enough protein, try eating some more protein. If you drink your calories, try not drinking your calories. Little things like that tend to make the biggest differences. And again, stacking wins is what this is all about, because the behavior science says you are more likely to change your behavior if you can constantly have small victories instead of like waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. All of a sudden, all of it's better. It's like that almost never happens. So try to give people like those little breadcrumbs to follow, and they're more likely to change their behavior for the long term, as opposed to being like, all right, for the next 6 weeks, we are eating no cheese and no pizza.
Take it down a notch, pal.
No pizza.
I don't know that there's been a 30-day stretch. Actually, yeah, there's been some sort of paleo challenge where I weighed like 1 to 112 pounds.
Sick.
With a few wet towels.
1 to 112? 1 to 112?
Yep,
Somewhere
somewhere
between
in that
there.
I think you guys are off the hook for your final thoughts. I think you think you're sort of bringing that home a little bit. Would you like to give your final thoughts, or you want me to go first?
I just want to say that I'm going to need at least one of you to remind me next time I'm in here that it is 1,000 degrees in this
You
place.
just get sweaty like me.
I need to get out of here
Stonky
now.
over there.
Thank you. Jelly beans are all stuck together.
Now they're one jelly bean, so you can eat them
That
all.
is not a euphemism. She has actual jelly beans.
My jelly beans are fully stuck together.
So would you like your final thoughts now or after me?
Yeah, you can go.
I
Okay.
thought that was it.
I thought so too.
Nope.
I'm so sweaty.
Nope. I had an idea, but I want to go a different route after listening to you guys talk. The concept of, again, that immature coach, mentor, whatever, is sort of unrealistic, and it typically puts somebody up on that high horse. The reason why I feel qualified to talk to you about the fact that the all or nothing idea, concept, mentality doesn't work is because I'm so naturally inclined to be that way as a person. And you just strike out so many fucking times that you're like, I can't keep making this excuse that that's who I am as a person. Well, that's just, you know how it is. Like, you typically can commiserate with another person who is that way, but eventually you have to be like, okay, so that's not working. I know it's not working. If everyone else is crazy, am I crazy? That sort of vibe. So, I don't want it to come across like it did, 13 years ago in my coaching career, that, again, I am on this high horse and I am, shouting down commands from above. This is a lot of fucking guess and check work on every single category that we've talked about and many more, where it's like, this way of thinking is not serving me. I can't make any progress in the areas that I want to because of this. So my final thoughts definitely go to the personalization thing. Also, I think comes with a bit of humility and a bit of like, these are actually choices. Like, I can make this choice. I can decide to not be Mr. All or Nothing with this different stuff. Doesn't work.
Yeah, so I think I just have like two pieces of advice. One, anytime you make a change in your life, whether it's, health related or career related or whatever, it can be like a really lonely place if you are not open to like sharing your experiences or like putting it out in the world, like talking with somebody else about it. So I think one thing, if you're somebody who's trying to make a change and kind of implement these different concepts, find somebody else who is interested in doing that. Like, if I were to guess, there's got to be at least, one or maybe a handful of people who are like, sure, I'll get on board with this, change. We'll go for a walk together every other day or something like that. Find a journal, like write down changes that you've made, how you've been feeling, like differences that you see in your sleep, your, performance in the gym, whatever, all that stuff. So I think it's important to kind of realize that when you do make a change, or if you're thinking about it, it's a lot easier to not only stay committed, but like feel good and like motivated about those changes if you can kind of share that with somebody else. And it could be a family member, it could be a coach, it could be, your cashier at the grocery store that you go to see every day, anybody. So
Belinda's real nice.
That's the first piece of advice. Second, anybody that you talk to or you look to for advice, I think you need to have a relationship where you can kind of believe in their practices and they also like believe you. So it's not so much like a black and white, like, these are the things I want you to do, but like, make sure that you're talking with somebody and kind of confiding in somebody and trusting somebody that asks you all of the questions. Like, hey, checking in, how did you feel when we made this change? Or like, how did you feel when we did this? Is this working? Do you feel like we need to do something different? Like, are you still motivated to stay committed to this? Like, do you have any questions? I think if you can have that relationship with, whoever it is, and that could be somebody on the internet or somebody in your life that you trust, that communication is really important in, everything as a whole. So making sure that you're not just paying for a program that you can print online and have zero contact or communication with somebody if you really want to make a significant change.
I don't think any of the four of us would be sitting here if we weren't into the N=1 experiments of I tried this, I tested it, what was the outcome? If there are a lot of people out there that just don't have that sort of mindset, and you can pay somebody sort of what you were already saying. Obviously you want to trust that person, and sometimes it is just, a friend where hopefully you can reciprocate in some way, but bring another person into the fold to do this. That's why, again, a CrossFit coach, a nutrition coach, a life coach, health coach, whatever it is, can be so valuable when the information that they're delivering to you, you already knew. So if you're not that kind of person that's going to just consistently guess and check and do that and do these little experiments, bring somebody else into the equation. Like Caroline said, whether it's a friend, whether it's, somebody that you're paying a coach, that sort of thing. Did we do it?
Did it.
All right, ladies and gents, thank you for tuning into another episode of the Misfit Podcast. And thank you to our show sponsors. You can head to properfuel.co, use the code word Carol, CAROL. You can head to sharpentheaxecode.com, use the code word Carol. You can head to misfitathletics.com, teammisfit.com, or the SugarWOD marketplace, but don't stop there. Head to discord.gg/misfitathletics, join the community, have the immersive experience that we just explained with the Misfit Project. Don't just look at those words that are written down on SugarWOD on the website. Take in the content, communicate with your fellow misfits. You're going to get a lot more out of it than just nose to the grindstone. This is what they said to do, hands up in the air. This is what I'm going to do. We'll see you next week.